The first morning light fell softly across Durbanville, but behind one unremarkable door, an operation was unfolding that could have claimed hundreds of lives. Over 2,000 liters of illicit alcohol were being brewed, bottled, and prepared for distribution, hidden in plain sight within what appeared to be an ordinary residential home. The smell alone, pungent and suffocating, gave little hint to the deadly potential contained within. How many people had unknowingly purchased these bottles before authorities intervened, and how many more could have been poisoned if residents hadn't acted? It began with a tip-off, a call from a neighbor who noticed unusual activity and decided that silence was too high a price to pay. In a society where public vigilance is often dismissed, this one act of courage brought police officers face to face with a production line capable of harming countless people. The house contained 11 industrial-sized drums, each filled with homemade gin, and a crude distillation machine designed to produce high volumes of alcohol with no concern for safety. At first glance, it might have seemed like a minor crime, but the reality was far more sinister. Counterfeit alcohol, often containing methanol, can cause blindness, organ failure, and death. 5 Malawian nationals were arrested, alongside the homeowner, a Chinese national whose role remains under investigation. The youth of some suspects highlights the tragic way in which young people are lured into dangerous criminal networks, risking their freedom and even their lives for money they barely understand. How many young South Africans are being silently drawn into such underground economies every day, and what are the social conditions that make these paths seem viable? Police confirmed that the bottles recovered bore the labels of popular alcohol brands, recycled and repurposed to deceive buyers. This is not merely a case of illegal brewing, it is an assault on public trust and a calculated effort to harm the unsuspecting. The forensic analysis underway will determine just how toxic the alcohol was and whether this network is linked to other poisoning cases in the region. This incident is a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself with gunfire or sirens. Sometimes it arrives disguised in familiarity, in a bottle that promises pleasure but delivers death. The operation could have gone undetected for months without the vigilance of a concerned community. How many similar networks operate unnoticed, and how many lives hang in the balance while they do? City officials praise the swift intervention, noting that counterfeit alcohol is a growing threat across South Africa, fueled by unemployment, economic desperation, and the high demand for cheap liquor. Yet, for every operation shut down, there are likely dozens more shifting locations, using rented houses and exploiting unsuspecting landlords. How can law enforcement keep up when profit is valued above human life? The political implications of such operations are vast. It exposes systemic failures in regulation, governance, and public accountability. When a deadly operation can thrive quietly in a middle-class suburb, what does it say about the state's capacity to protect citizens? How many other lethal enterprises operate in the shadows of urban neighborhoods? For decades, South Africa has struggled with issues of oversight, corruption, and uneven law enforcement. Incidents like this shine a light on the consequences of those failures. They also reveal the critical role communities play in maintaining public safety. In a society where trust in the state is often fragile, citizens become the first line of defense. Will the government acknowledge this reality, or continue to leave responsibility on ordinary people? The case in Durbanville also raises questions about how justice is applied. Are arrests and investigations conducted consistently, or do they fluctuate based on political influence, social status, or economic power? The law may be clear, but the outcomes often tell a different story. What message does this send to both perpetrators and potential whistleblowers? When authorities entered the house, they encountered a world that seemed both familiar and alien, a domestic space transformed into a high-volume, lethal production line. The duality is striking, a metaphor for how ordinary life can coexist with extraordinary danger. How many other everyday spaces are quietly housing threats we cannot immediately see? The seizure of the distillation equipment and the confiscated liquor marks only the beginning of an ongoing investigation. Officials must map out the network, identify suppliers, and uncover any connections that extend beyond Durbanville. This is a critical step in ensuring that justice is more than symbolic. How many operations remain mobile, shifting from suburb to suburb, leaving only death trails behind them. Counterfeit alcohol is not simply a criminal enterprise. It is a public health crisis, a political failure, and a stark example of governance gaps. Authorities emphasize that community involvement is crucial, yet systemic measures must also address supply chains, policing effectiveness, and economic incentives that make illicit production profitable. Are current policies sufficient? Or are they only reactive, waiting for disasters to occur? The involvement of foreign nationals also highlights transnational dynamics in criminal networks. Economic disparities, migration patterns, and regional trade can create conditions ripe for exploitation. How should governments balance law enforcement with humanitarian considerations when confronting such networks? In the days following the raid, questions remain unanswered. How much counterfeit alcohol had already entered the market? How many people may have suffered silently? And how will law enforcement prevent similar cases in the future? The uncertainty feeds a lingering unease in the community, a reminder that victory against crime is rarely permanent. The case also underscores the way that criminal operations capitalize on human complacency. Ordinary behaviors, like purchasing alcohol from informal markets, can unknowingly support life-threatening enterprises. How aware are citizens of the hidden risks surrounding everyday transactions, and what responsibility does the state bear in providing protection and information? This raid demonstrates the necessity of interagency coordination. From community tips to metro police responses, from forensic laboratories to the courts, effective action requires synchronization. When any link in this chain fails, the consequences can be catastrophic. Are current systems robust enough to respond to fast-moving criminal threats? The narrative of this Durbanville operation is also a stark lesson in economic realities. Rising prices, limited employment opportunities, and high demand for consumer goods create fertile ground for criminal opportunism. Can structural reform address the root causes, or will enforcement alone remain a temporary solution? The Durbanville case may conclude in courtrooms, but its lessons resonate far beyond. Crime does not always wear a mask, and danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it comes bottled, disguised, and placed in plain sight. And sometimes, the difference between life and death is the courage to act. What would you do if you were the neighbor who noticed the suspicious activity? Would you speak up or remain silent? The answers define not only individuals but the resilience of communities themselves.